Well, I think you would have a Democrat who would say, let's do voter ID, but that's not actually what the SAVE Act is. So Jim Clyburn's talked about this, and he said, I'm for voter ID. I'm not for disproportionate voter ID. And what the SAVE Act does is that it requires that you either have your birth certificate or your passport, which is different than accepting a driver's license, for instance. And the reason for that...
I don't know if that's true.
It is true. Read the bill.
Okay, I will.
I'm sorry, that might hurt you.
And then I will, tomorrow we'll have to correct it.
Well, I won't be here,
there's no
so you can give it to Harold.
There's no way this bill requires people to show up with their birth certificates. Then Barack couldn't register.
That's disgusting, first of all.
We believe he's American.
There is a very strong case, actually, that the SAVE Act will hurt more Republicans than it will Democrats. So the people who will be most affected... So why wouldn't you want to do it?
Fine.
Let's go, baby.
If you want me to explain, I can, but... Sure. I mean, so President Trump is basically saying that the SAVE Act as it's written, he's like, look, don't try to sink the DHS funding for that. He's for Real ID, but so are 85% of Americans for Real ID. And it has to go through the committee process, et cetera. Don't shut down the government over it. We all agree there should be ID at the voting booth.
Oh, yeah. I'm not even talking about the DHS funding fight. I'm talking about the fact that if you look at estimates right now, so 21 million Americans don't have ready access to either their passport or their birth certificate. 50% of Americans don't have a passport at all. If you want to talk about who has a passport versus who doesn't, we can get into that and where they might vote. Then on top of it, to your voter fraud idea, people do actually look into it. Even like the Heritage Foundation, very conservative, found 35 illegal aliens voted in 2024. Utah just did a review of 2 million people in their voter rolls, came up with one non-citizen registration and no non-citizen
Try
voting.
California.
So getting rid of also universal mail-in voting, which is part of this, would affect a red state in Utah, Nevada that also voted for Trump.
Hey guys, I wanted to double tap. Is that the right term? I don't know. I want to talk about the SAVE Act again. I already posted a clip from the 5 about this, but I've been thinking about it since we got offset and realizing that people, even Republicans who are very well researched, steeped in the material, whatever, people are paying attention, don't even know that the SAVE Act is not a voter ID bill. It's a voter registration bill. And those things are markedly different. And when they talk about it as voter ID, it makes Democrats seem like we're on the wrong side of another 80-20 issue, when in reality, most Democrats are open to the idea of having to present voter ID when you go to the polls. It just has to be reasonable. So accepting driver's licenses, state IDs, tribal IDs, even if they don't have an expiration date. Maybe there's some conversation about student IDs even. We have to be open to those kinds of conversations so that you can properly push back on what the SAVE Act wants to do, which makes it that you have to show proof of citizenship when you register to vote. So that's a passport or a birth certificate. And I think a lot of us know how complicated that gets. A, nearly 50% of Americans don't even have a passport. That includes a lot of Republican voters, especially MAGA voters. But then B, with the birth certificate issue, how many of you have the birth certificate just on hand or are going to go through the effort of going to get it? Let's say you're a student. You just showed up at the University of Wisconsin. You want to be able to vote. You're in a swing state. Did you bring your birth certificate when you went off to college? I sincerely doubt it. My mom kept mine locked up pretty tight. And then if you've gone through a name change, it's a complete nightmare for women who are listening to this and have changed their name. You know what I'm talking about. I didn't even change my name, and it took me 3 trips to the DMV to be able to get my real ID because different forms of ID had different formulations of my name because I have 2 middle names. Thanks a lot, Mom, for that. It didn't make a ton of sense. Though I do kind of love having your last name in my name. Anyway, Democrats have to own this better. We have to talk about the importance of voter ID to make it clear to people that the SAVE Act is not about voter ID. And it's going to result in millions of people, a lot of them who would vote Republican, having a much more difficult time being able to get registered and then go to the polls.
Not only is the SAVE Act about making it more difficult for certain people to vote, but it's also changing how you register to vote. As Tarlov said there, that's a crucial difference, and not just a rhetorical one, a deeply substantive one. And it's convenient for the Republicans to muddy the waters around it.
So Republicans have this bill, the SAVE Act. It just passed the House of Representatives. It's on its way to the Senate, and it stands for one thing. They're trying to stop your right to vote. Republicans believe that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. And frankly, they believe that anytime a Democrat wins an election, it must be because of fraud. They have no evidence of that claim because it's made up. The fact of the matter is our elections in this country are wildly clean. There are very few, if any, actual cases of fraud in most elections. And when you find them, it's on the margins, one or two people that shouldn't have voted here or there. But Republicans want you to believe that this is an epidemic. It isn't. But what they really want to do is just stop you from voting. So they're going to use this claim that there's fraud in our elections to pass the SAVE Act, which will make it way harder for you to vote. One of the things the SAVE Act does is to require your birth certificate to have your existing name on it. Well, for a lot of married women, your birth certificate, right, doesn't have your married name. And so millions of women in this country are basically disqualified from voting. It requires you to produce, when you register, a birth certificate or a passport. We don't do that now, and that's how millions of Americans register to vote online. But now, online registration may be completely eliminated. The bill requires states every 30 days to purge their voter files of people, for instance, who haven't voted in a while. So if you're just busy and you haven't voted in the last couple of elections, you might show up to vote in the next presidential election and your name's gone, because what they're trying to do is just take you off the rolls. This is absurd. It's all built on a lie that elections are being stolen by some cabal of Democrats and Nicolas Maduro and George Soros and whoever else. But it's really all about just trying to stop you from being able to vote.
How many of you registered to vote online? I know that I have in the past. It's convenient and should be expected in a modern democracy. But of course, the Republicans hate it because it's convenient. Nothing about registering or about voting should be convenient, according to them. And they're not going to let a complete and utter lack of evidence of voter fraud stop them from pursuing this voting dystopia.
Once the partisan gerrymandering effort clearly failed, now they've moved on. Somehow were able to swear out a search warrant. I would love to see the representations made on that affidavit to search the Fulton County Board of Elections for 2020 results. Then they demanded that Minnesota turn over voter rolls in order for the ICE officers to withdraw. Now Kristi Noem is saying that she's going to take it into her own control to make sure the right people vote. And what this all is sort of geared around is this completely bogus SAVE Act, where the Republicans have created mistrust in the system, in our electoral system, not based on fact, not based on data, not based on evidence, because there is no data, no evidence that shows voter fraud of any material means that affects an election. And then they're going to say, oh, well, we have to solve this mistrust that we've created. No, that's not how it works. They're trying to suppress the vote. They're trying to take over voting machines and voter rolls, and they're trying to rig this election.
The Republicans rushed to do their gerrymandering without thinking through the effects. There's also growing evidence they haven't thought through how the SAVE Act might end up hurting them as well.
So Republicans are now turning around and trying to stop the SAVE Act from being passed in the Senate. Which is weird because Republicans were solely responsible for promoting it in the first place. Because I guess they figured out the lowest amount of passport holders live in red states. Duh. Because that would require them to possibly leave the country and also know that other countries exist, understand the world isn't flat in order to leave it, interact with other cultures and possibly other people of different races. Sometimes I think you just can't be this dumb, but MAGA is also the party that believes college and science is a scam, so.
So look, if this ended up hurting Republicans more than Democrats, that would be ironic and maybe even a little darkly humorous. But the thing stopping me from really enjoying it is that, unlike Republican politicians, I'm not actually interested in it being harder for people to vote, whether or not they'll vote for candidates I like. And make no mistake, this bill will make it harder for a lot of different people to register to vote and to participate in our democracy. It hurts voters across almost every state, those in the military, tribal voters, rural voters, the half or so of Americans without passports, the people who've changed their names, as was pointed out. Transgender people, of course, are going to be hurt in any bill being pushed right now by the Republicans. And let's not ignore the class component of this, because these forms of ID the bill would require are not free, not even close to free. And so this is, in addition to all the other problems, a modern day poll tax. I hope that it fails to be passed, and I think that that might be the case. But no matter what, it's on those of us who still care about saving our democracy to make sure that people know the stakes in this fight over the SAVE Act, and to work our asses off to make sure that no matter how much Republicans do to suppress the vote, as many people as possible stay invested in and involved in our democracy.